Barney.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hello.
Bonjour.
Hi.
How you doing there? Yellow.
Hello.
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 Yo.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hello.
Well, hello there to you guys. Welcome to episode number 7 of Customer Experience Tales from the Trenches. I'm Mark Mandel, and thanks for coming on this ride with me. I'm so glad that you're here. Today's going to be a great show. We have a lot of stuff. In fact, I had to write it down. There's so much stuff that we're going to talk about today. So thank you for coming on this ride, and I hope you buckle up because this is going to be a good one. We're also going to run probably close to the full hour, maybe just a few minutes shy of a full hour today. So I hope that's okay with you, and you come along with me for this. You know, as I start off the show today, I love talking about customer experience. I love talking about companies have great customer experiences. I showed a video a second ago. And for those of you who are watching live, or either on LinkedIn or through YouTube or through whatever channel you're seeing this, I'm going to throw a challenge out there right off the bat. That video I put on just a moment ago with the people saying hello, if you know what that video is or was and where it was from and the importance of that, the first person who can chime in the comments, I'm going to reach into my pocket and I'm going to send you personally today $25 in cash, but only for the very first person. So if you know where that video come from, $25 is on the line coming out of Mark Mandel's pocket. So let us know through the comments that you think you know what it is and what is it. And if you're the first guy or first person to let us know, you got the $25 coming to you. This show, CX Tales from the Trenches, is one of 3 different shows that I love to do. And I do all 3 each month. I do a short format show that's 5 or 6 minutes long, and I call that Customer Experience a minute to win it, which is just a little short clip video that I put together and put out there once a week or once every 10 days. I do a middle-sized video where we talk a lot about what's going on in the industry, and I bring a favorite practitioner on, and they and I sit and talk. And that's called Customer Experience Unsung Heroes. That's like a 20-25 minute show. But this show, the Tales from the Trenches show, is a long format show. It's 45, 50, 55, 60 minutes, depending on the show. And it allows us in a special way to get a little bit deeper in the conversation because we're not rushed. And that's going to be the purpose of this conversation today. We're going to try to get pretty deep into a topic that I'm sure is on your mind, and we'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. As we get started here, I like to have different kind of unique or distinct segments on this show. And again, for the sake of clarity of what's coming, I want to take a few minutes and talk about something that in my mind is full of amazing customer experience, but not something that sort of comes to mind every day. And I call this my personal wow moments. And my personal wow moments is if I think of a business or somebody that I've interacted with that really blew me away, that caused me to go, wow, that was something really unique and really special. And I thought, given that we're sitting here doing this show right now in March, and for me, I grew up as a baseball fan. And for those of you not in the United States, I apologize for that, but it's my favorite sport. And, you know, one of the things as a baseball fan that really depresses me is the fact that the younger generation, the kids these days, don't love the sport of baseball. They seem to don't follow the sport. They love basketball, they love soccer, they love F1. But baseball is not on their radar screen as much as it should be. And I'll tell you guys, my friends, point blank, there's one team that I became aware of only about a year ago that just blew my mind. And they're not really a normal team. They're not part of the Major League Baseball system, but they sit outside of that. They're a team called the Savannah Bananas. And my friends, if you don't know the Savannah Bananas, check them out. You'll find them on YouTube. You'll find them all over the web. I describe them to my friends who don't know them as the Harlem Globetrotters, if you know them, of baseball. And they take the sport that, you know, the reason the young people are not gravitating to baseball, they say the season's too long, there's too many teams, the game's too slow. And they speed it all up and they put it like at 150%. And they just make it fun. They do acrobatics, they do music. They really are all about fan engagement. And they make such a difference. And these guys are making money hand over fist now. They started off doing games, 2 years ago in what looked like high school fields. And now they're selling out 90,000 seat football stadiums to show this baseball game in. So they're doing something right. And I'll tell you point blank, my friends, if you want to have an amazing experience, check out the Savannah Bananas. They do a road show. They're not just in Savannah. They'll come to a city near you if it's in the United States. And I think you'll be blown away by that. Next thing on my docket is I love to recognize people when they do amazing work. And 3 months ago or 4 months ago on this show, I gave away some awards to some people that I know that I thought were really making a big difference out there. So I thought it might be fun while we're here today to do more awards. I love recognizing people. So I'm going to have what I'm going to call the Customer Experience Impact Awards. And what I wanted to do is just take a moment to take 3 people in my life, 3 people who have made a world of difference, who have taught me everything that I think that I know about customer experience. And they really opened my eyes over the years to this. The first guy I want to talk about is a guy named Jesse Cole. And as you can see on my screen, if you see that, sorry for the little miniature type underneath this picture, he's the guy that runs the Savannah Bananas. He's the general manager, but he's also the owner of the business. And he's out there on the field, game in and game out, doing the announcing. He's out there interacting with fans. He's climbing through the stadium. He's all out there. And I'm telling you that I'm going to give him what I call my Changemaker Award. The guy who's out there as a CX guy or a CX-minded guy, even though he's the CEO of the company. You know, he's out there making that difference. And I want to give Jesse Cole a shout out that he really belongs. The next guy I want to talk about is a gentleman that I work closely with on a pretty regular basis. If you don't know Brian Curry, he's a guy in our industry. He's the co-founder of a company called OCX Cognition. And Brian and his partner, Richard Owen, are out there solving some really interesting and thorny CX problems. And if I could tell you, I'm giving Brian what I call my Brains and Brawn Award. He's going to be the smartest guy that I've met today in a long while, and how he's out there to solve the problem of what do we do when we've relied on surveys for 25 years to get insights. What do we do when surveys run out of gas? What do we do when we can't get surveys back anymore? What if a good day we're looking at a 3% response rate? What do we do then? Take a look at OCX Cognition and look up Brian in particular. I think you'll be amazed. And then the third guy I'm going to talk about is an old boss of mine from years ago. I went to work in the strategy business of CX a long while ago, and I took a job with this gentleman named Lior Arusi. Lior used to live in the great state of New Jersey, and now he splits his time between New Jersey and Israel. And I'll tell you that there's probably no human being on earth that I've ever met that taught me more about customer experience than Lior Arusi did. And my funny story about that is the day I went to go work for Lior, I rolled into the job there on day one thinking, I got this. I know exactly how to do what has to get done here. And I could tell you, my friends, in like minute 1 of hour 1 of day 1, a little light bulb went off and said, no, I don't. So I'm going to tell you very clearly that I can make this, that Lior is when I ended up leaving him years later, I said, you are my Obi-Wan Kenobi of customer experience. And I really feel like that's the role that he's had in my life, and he's taught me what it is that I know. So Lior, big shout out to you. Big shout out to you, Brian, and also to Jesse. Thank you guys for doing what you do and how you do it. You know, one of the things I also love doing on shows like this is giving away things as gifts to you for being part of this journey with me. And you guys have universally come and said, we love this little thing that you give away books. You give away other people's books. So I thought I would take a minute to talk about a book, and I've talked about this book before, but I want to make sure that you know that I have a few copies here that I could give you as my gift. There's a guy who wrote a book called Competing on Analytics. His name is Tom Davenport. If you don't know Tom Davenport, or the book Competing on Analytics is one of 3 or 4 books that Tom's written, but that book in particular hit me like a ton of bricks. And I want you to know that I think it's probably one of the go-to books in my life for all the things that we like to talk about analytically in our CX work. I have 3 or 4 copies here at the house that Tom gave me to give to you. If you would like a copy of Competing on Analytics as Tom and my gift, again, hit us up in the messaging here or the chat area, or send me a message and say, hey, I want a copy of that book. and I'll make sure that you get a copy of Tom's book. It's really, truly well worth it. So guys, while we are here together today, there's no reason more important than what's coming up now. My favorite part of this show, or any show that I like to put together, are conversations where I get to sit down with people who inspire and who motivate me. And today is no different. In fact, today is a very, very special day. And I have two people that I love to think of as not just my business partners, but my friends. And we get together here and to talk. So I'd like to take a moment to talk about one of those friends in particular, and we'll bring him on, and we'll bring the other guy on. So there's a gentleman there's a company who I've been well aware of in our space for maybe 18 months now, give or take. The company is based in Europe, in the Netherlands, and it's called They Do. And if you don't know They Do, you're going to know They Do because of this episode of the show. There's a gentleman named Jochem Van der Veer who was one of the founders of the guy who got the ball rolling at that company. And he's the guy, as it relates in my mind, to redefining journey management, customer journey management. And we're going to talk a lot about that topic today. So I don't want to wait anymore to bring Jochem onto this call. So let's do this and simply say, hey, man, thanks for being here.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Thanks for hanging out. I described you a moment ago as a business partner and a friend. But it dawns on me that people who might be listening in might not know you or might not know They Do. Are you willing to take just a couple of minutes and just tell them what they need to know about you, tell them what they need to know about the business, kind of where it came from, what motivated you to do what you're doing, and why you do what you do? Because I think that story needs to be heard.
Sure. Love to. So we are a journey management company. We serve the biggest companies in the world, like GM, Ford, Johnson & Johnson, to help them accelerate their customer-centric practices. But let me get to what we actually do by setting the stage for where we're coming from. Like, we've been at it for almost a decade now, but not as a product company. So I'm a designer by training, and I've always worked in different constellations. And the thing I did before starting a product company was running a design firm out of necessity, because and this was like 8 years ago or so when we started this, we realized there's a lot of emphasis on customer centricity. I mean, design thinking was a big thing back then. Journey mapping were tools of the trade that everyone was going on about. But it always was stuck on the project level.
Yep.
If there was budget at all, it was stuck on the project level. It didn't scale. It wasn't foundational to the company. And today, that's still not the case. We have VOC programs. We have this notion of customer centricity in many different teams. But we are all, like, from our different department, from our different silo, looking at it from a different angle, and have all competing interests in actually helping the customer and therefore not helping the customer. So that was one of the reasons that we started a company to tie the voice of the customer, the business metrics, and basically the entire prioritization rituals together, using the journey as the context, because that was the foundational piece that was missing. You have a lot of insight analytics, you have a lot of business analytics, you have a lot of prioritization, lean, agile, all these methodologies and frameworks and ways of structuring the company. But there was nothing that really tied it together.
Yep.
To have that unified impact. And the larger the company, the harder it gets. And the more rooted in legacy systems and structures we are, the harder it gets. So we are on a mission to get rid of that, to get rid of the red tape, to get rid of the bureaucracy, and to truly link voice of the customer insights to business impact. And we're using the journey management as a framework to have a good product solution. Of course, it's accelerated by AI. We can talk about that. But I think the most interesting bit here to know is that for the first time, companies can actually quantify their unstructured data, bring it on par with their structured data.
Interesting.
And not over rely on the metrics, but bring the voice of the customer and the insights on par, so that they have a way better way to prioritize and work in lockstep with the customer and their journey.
That's cool. You've alluded to a couple of things in your introduction that really sit well with me and feel so impactful and so true. And I think the biggest one, and that you both said outright and also just inferred, was the misperception in the past of how to represent a journey, that it becomes almost like an artifact or almost like a souvenir of the work, the result of the work, and not the strategic input into the work. And it's almost like you have to flip the model on its head from, before, and I could tell you this, we'll bring on our guest in a moment, but I'll tell you that, in the past, I remember, even when I worked for that gentleman, Lior, who I gave the recognition to a minute ago, we did a lot of journey mapping, and this is 10, 15 years ago. Right? But what we did is we used journey mapping as a piece of documentation, right? We did it sometimes in PowerPoint, sometimes in Excel, right? And that became sort of the thing that you could hold in your hand when the work was done, to say, yeah, this was the thing, right? And then that disappeared, and then any ability to manage that journey went away. And there was no data. You're talking about infusing data, right? And using that to prioritize decisions and break things together. None of that existed back then, at least in my life, it didn't, right? And so for me, making the leap from mapping the journey, which could be done in a billion different ways, in a billion different processes, and a billion different tools, to managing and optimizing that is a different level. And it's that level that makes it impactful.
Right. And there's actually like another level, right? One is mapping it out. The second is mapping or managing all your maps. But the third one, and this is where businesses are now going, is we call it actionable intelligence. You want all the different teams to look at the problem from the same angle, to understand the customer from the same direction, and then make decisions based off of that. And the only way to do that is that unifying your data and having a consistent language around it, instead of having all these journeys, all these roadmaps, all these documents, all these presentations, all these insight analytics everywhere and all over the place. So you might be solving the right problem, but you're doing it with 5 different teams at the same time, having competing interests and wasting a lot of everyone's time, resources, and ultimately not impacting the customer that much. So bringing that all together, using the journey as the context, is fantastic, but it's about a decision support system for the business that is underpinning this.
I hear that. There's a gentleman sitting on the sidelines here in this meeting I want to bring in. His name is Cary Cusumano. And Cary, again, I think of as a dear friend. He's not just one of the good guys, the nice guys in the world of customer experience. He's one of the smart guys in the world of customer experience also. And I put in my little blurb about this conversation, Cary dreams and journeys. And so I thought, let's introduce Cary into this conversation. Let's just 3 sit down and just have a really good chat. There he is. There's my friend Cary.
Hi, guys.
I love when technology works. Sometimes I hit the button here and I get the picture I'm looking for, and sometimes I don't. When I started this, we'll call it journey myself, of doing these types of podcasts, I did a whole live session on the second episode I did, and I forgot to press the button that says go live. So nobody saw anything. And I started getting texts going, are you going to do anything? And I went, oh, no. So I'm hopefully getting better at this. And so I'm glad that this is working. Cary, thanks for hanging out with Jochem and me.
Likewise. Thank you.
Cary, I'm going to start off by asking you a question, which is, who's Cary? Can we take a moment, like I asked Jochem, to kind of just let us learn about you, who you are, and kind of where you're coming from philosophically?
Sure. Well, for one thing, I'm glad you cited the Savannah Bananas. As you know, I'm in the greater Savannah area, and I can attest to they are a fan favorite around here.
They're cool, right?
And they're very cool. And so big fan of them as well myself. And, to answer your question, and to kind of follow what Jochem was saying with regards to this journey. I love the term journey management, by the way, Jochem, as opposed to journey mapping, because there is an implication of activity there. And what I see there is, you mentioned that it's harder as you get into larger companies. I used to actually work for a small company called Verizon.
A startup.
Yeah. And so that's really where my own journey into CX started. I have to tell you, to answer your question, Mark, a little bit about me. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to investigation. I love to dig into the details, get my hands dirty. And so naturally, a place for me was Lean Six Sigma. How do you go in and dig into broken processes that are causing bad experiences for customers, and use data? I learned along the way, as Jochem pointed out, that guess what? Unstructured data is just as powerful as structured data in telling these stories. But started to do that and became a certified Lean Six Sigma black belt there at Verizon. Now, as I started to come out of that program, there was a handful of us, maybe only 2 or 3 of us, okay, who felt like this notion of voice the customer, okay, which is one of the justifications for doing one of these Lean Six Sigma projects. This notion of voice the customer was a slide on your justification called the define phase, okay, for the project, that when the meeting was over, promptly got shoved in a drawer and forgotten about. Okay, this notion of voice the customer was never readdressed. There was never how did this impact the customer experience. It was always how much money did you save. And so the 3 or 4 of us felt like we want to give this voice the customer concept its due. And that's what migrated me into the customer experience world. Worked on the enterprise level customers for Verizon to make the customer experience for them. And I had a colleague who I went to one day. I said, when we get surveys back, maybe if we're lucky, we get a 4% response rate. Okay. And even among those, maybe only 1 in 10 has any verbatim comments. It's not really actionable. So to us at the time, voice the customer was an NPS score. Okay. So we decided to make ourselves experts in particular areas. I personally chose to go down the voice route, the voice analytics, using a package called Verint. You've probably heard of Verint, NICE, Nixidia, a lot of these companies that had built ways to analyze the unstructured voice of the customer. And I said, we're recording 100% of our phone calls in the call centers. Who's listening to them? And my friend said, Cary, if you see a business function that's not being fulfilled, just make it your job. And that's exactly what I did. I went deep into our call recordings. And of course, the goal was, being a Lean Six Sigma guy, saying, I'm going to go out and make a Pareto diagram of all the different types of calls that are coming into our call centers. And of course, that would have had about an 80% bar for my bill is wrong. But here's where I think Jochem and I our brains are fusing. Now, at the time, of course, I was doing this manually. We didn't have a nice tool like they do at the time. But I was taking and reconstructing those journeys backwards in time to say, here's the call. I got a bill problem. I would join that to maybe a chat transcript or an email or our OSS system. So in other words, I would go in and say, I heard him say a ticket number. I'll go into our repair system, find out when that ticket was entered. I'll go in and find from our billing systems when the billing ticket was entered. I would trace these things all the way back to the order. And you might find, Mark, that this, what started out as I've got a bill problem, really ended up being a third-party vendor acting on Verizon's behalf who sold the customer a service that was not compatible with their equipment.
Yep.
So it was very powerful. And then basically gain a little bit of notoriety from that to say, how'd you like to do what you're doing, but with our clients? And that's when I found myself on the call center floors with brands like JetBlue and Pella Windows and State Farm. And so this is where, again, the minds seem to be in the same place here, me doing it manually and Jochem bringing the power of AI to that.
Guys, both of you guys have talked about something near and dear to my heart. I'll frame it for both of us. Let's just kind of see where we take this conversation. I mentioned there's no shortage of ways to map a journey out there, technologically speaking. There's, you could do anything from, sticky notes on butcher paper to software to a whiteboard to whatever. But the common thread of those is not journey management, right? And for me, there's such a difference. And I've begun telling a story. I want to ask you guys if you think this story will resonate. I'm going to just pick on one software company. Let's go pick on a very popular company like Miro. Right? I mean, for me, Miro is PowerPoint. And the reality is if you over-rotate on the picture of the journey, you're losing sight of the fact that that's an unmanageable exercise. And what I used to say to people is data will always tell you a story. The job of data, like Cary, you said a minute ago, there's goodness in the story and the story comes from the data, right? So if the data that you can pull together forms the narrative of the journey, the best tools out there to manage that narrative are tools that can harness this data, apply some level of reason and intelligence to it, find those stories, find those nuggets, and then organize them in a way that becomes a story. And it allows we as practitioners to tell that story to others in different ways that draw people in, and we can solve problems together. Jochem, am I, from your perspective, am I overreaching with this idea of data telling us a story, or does that make sense to you as an expert in this business?
No, 100%. It starts with data, right? It doesn't start with the journey or this notion of a journey map. Like that's not the point. It's
Exactly.
a tool to contextualize your data, but you still need to aggregate many different sources, many different data points.
Yep.
And those data together will help you in that context to understand one point of view, right? Because a journey is a journey. But looking at, let's say, a larger, maybe in Verizon, like what are people calling about? Sure, it's about billing. But when we look at a typical telco, there are so many other sources of data, feedback coming through that would indicate where the real problems are, right? Preventing it for a single customer or like solving that for a single customer. That's great. But what journey management is really about is helping the business get insight into what to do next, where to prioritize, where to invest. What is the alignment with our broader strategy? Like, where are our customers going? And that all starts with data, because you can't just interview 10 people and say, hey, look, N is 5, here's my insight, and we should go right. And people, they just don't trust that. So generative research and jobs to be done research and interviewing customers is essential.
Yep.
But it's just, again, one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And all the data together from your different sources, like all the calls, like if you get a few million calls a year, well, how about a few thousand calls a day? So what is that data telling you about the specific context? And I think that is the shift that we're seeing and that you're underpinning. It all starts with aggregation. It starts with analyzing, and it starts with contextualizing that. And if you don't do that piece, what you get is an insight. Oh, people call because they call because they have billing issues. Yeah, okay, we know that, but that's not a real insight. Right. That's just counting, basically. There's more of this than that. But the real insight, the real understanding comes from contextualizing it, bringing more different data sources together, and then aligning that with the business needs and saying, like, do we actually have an opportunity here to do something, or is it irrelevant?
What do you think, Cary?
Well, I like where you started with this. It's you got the data side and you got the storytelling side. And I think that's where Jochem it fits. He's taking large volumes of data and turning that into a story. And here's why that's important. It's not either or. You got to have both and. You've got to have the data to reach people's minds. Okay. But being emotional creatures, it's the storytelling that really reaches us in the heart. And I think that's where what Jochem is doing there is taking those large volumes of data and turning it into something relevant that gets you back to, you know what? Yes, it came in as a bill call, but when you look at the root cause, it was really a bad order. Okay, let's solve the right problem.
Yeah. From my standpoint, it's fascinating. I'm going back in time, and maybe this is less of an issue now, but in the early days, people didn't even really understand what a customer experience map or even a journey map was. And I was giving an example. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to be mean, but I had a client back in my consulting days years ago, and she had hired another consulting firm to come in and do a mapping exercise for one of their segments of their customers. And she came to me, she goes, what I bought from them is unusable. So I said, come show me what they did for you. And she came to my old office, and she had some of that, that brown butcher paper that we put up on the wall when we're doing mapping workshops. And she unwound this thing, and it must have been 20 feet long with probably 800 little Post-it notes on it. And I said, what is that? And she said, it's our customer journey. And I said, how is that even possible? First off, there's no, using your word, Jochem, there's no context, right? It's just a flow chart. It's this step happens, and this step happens, and this step happens, according to them. And I said, well, let's unpack this a little bit. And I'm not going to get into the specifics, but she had, certain discrete touch points on this journey that made a great deal of sense. Like customer is considering making a purchase. Customer is investigating making a purchase. Customer is coming to our location to initiate a purchase. Customer is looking to finance their purchase, and they fill out an application for financing assistance. And then her flow chart went off to like 117 other little Post-its that are all what happens to that credit application after we submit it, but prior to getting a yes or no from credit, right? And I said, how many of those steps does your customer even participate in or even know about? And she said, well, none. They file the application and they get a yes or no. So I said, well, then that's not a journey map. And I literally took my shoes off my feet and put them on the table. And I said, let's walk through this butcher paper as if we're walking in our customer's shoes, step by step. And we said, do they do this? Are they aware? And there was no concept back then of front stage, backstage components of the journey like there are often now. But back then it was just if the customer is unaware, it doesn't exist. Or worse yet, you both heard me tell this story. I went to see an old client again back in the old days, and I remember we got them believing in customer journeys, and they were all wound up about the importance of the journey and understanding the journey and making the journey better. And one day I went to go visit them in their office, and they had a journey map painted on their hallway wall. It was like, picture the whole length of the hallway. And it was decorative. It was nicely done. And I said, what's that? And he said, the journey map. And I said, well, why is it on your wall? And he said, well, it's because it's our journey. It's our customers. And I said, but it's in paint. And he said, yeah. And I said, by the time that paint dried, it's probably wrong. Customers' preferences change, needs change, marketplaces change, everything changes. And the minute you put that on your wall, it might not be right anymore. So these guys are treating it, again, like the result of the work and not a strategic part of planning and initiating and carrying through that work. And I think people lose sight of the fact, and I want to kind of drill into this, journey management, for me, one of the components of journey management, different than mapping, is this fact that we manage our journeys through a living, breathing, always on representation of what's happening with our customers. Is that a fair statement, guys?
You know what's fascinating about this? Like I've seen many versions of this as well, but you also have to take the perspective of the company, right? If it's not so much today anymore, but like especially like a decade ago or so, 10 years ago, like when journey mapping was the hot thing to do, when you first realize what it could do for you, but like people get all amped up, like you say. And there is value in having something printed on the wall, because then that signals like we care about the customer journey. It's important to us. Like we made an effort to this. So like in the nascent pieces of like establishing practices that are more customer centric than maybe like process or business centric, it's great to do this, right? So we should not devalue like everyone listening that is hanging on the wall and thinking like, oh, we should get rid of it. Like there's value in it. But the modern version of this is, I don't know if you saw the post from Brian Chesky a year ago on Airbnb, where they aligned their guest experience, their host experience, 8 stages perfectly lined up, where the whole business was designing their products and policies around that. So that's the modern version of this, but you have to get the abstraction level right. Because the other example that you gave, where like there's like hundreds of steps and all this like nuances and maybe drawings around it, like that's such a complicated behemoth of a thing. It's not useful to anyone but its creator, right? So getting that map in your head, maybe that's useful for some people. Maybe Cary, you are geeking out on this piece, like maybe not. But that's also not the right way. So where I think businesses are landing is like, yes, we need to have an overarching structure that defines who we are, the customer life cycle, if you will, that guest host experience, if you will. Like there needs to be an overarching structure where we say, when we look at our data through the lens of our customer, here's how we are organized. But then when it gets more deep into the fabric of the organization, when it's still compartmentalized this. Mm-hmm. If I am a claims department business unit in an insurance company, and I rely on our agile organization, our product teams to build new capabilities, but I also have a risk assessment team, and I also have a team that is creating new products, literal insurance products, like all those dependencies come back to me. But what I care about is when people file a claim, what is their experience with us? What is the time? Because we want to reduce that. What is the amount of claims we're getting? And what is the error rate in that, right? And then on the higher level of the business, like what is our combined ratio that as a company we get judged on if we're a good or bad insurance company? So the level of abstraction is very important. And that should be agnostic to where the data is coming from. But given a specific goal you have, that's when you shape the context. Say, okay, I'm about to reduce claims. The volume of claims should go down. So let's look at the experiences people have with us, the journeys they have with us in that context.
Yep.
And all of a sudden you realize like there's big opportunities for these 5 different teams. Let's do that. And the results should bubble up higher. But the abstraction level is important. That's one way of thinking about it. But then also like where in the way you are doing this as a company are you? If you're in the early stages, like let's paint it on the wall. Let's do it. Let's be vocal about it. But if you're a very mature company, like you want to have your segmentation model, your data model, all of it being pegged against your journey taxonomy. And there's a little bit of a balance. So let's allow people to have them on the wall. But I'm with you. That's not necessarily something modern companies do anymore.
You know, I've seen also talk about level of abstraction, the opposite also with a gentleman who is a product owner at a direct-to-consumer company. And I said, what's your product? He said, go to such and such a page of my website. I said, okay. And he said, you see that little blue button on the corner? I said, yeah, that button's my product. Mm. He says, I own the button. And I want to make sure the journey that connects to that button is the best journey we can make and take any friction of pressing that button out of the equation. Right. So he has a very zoomed in view. He wasn't looking at the totality of the relationship or even, the use of the website. He was hyper focused in on, does the button get pressed and how often do they press it? And if there's reasons for them not to go press the button, how do they minimize those if the goal is to get more people pushing it? So you could see from both sides, and I could see, a good journey management mindset. You'll look at kind of the feeders into that button and then the outputs of that button, right? So you look and say, somebody went to that button you mentioned before, Jochem, like the jobs to be done, right? Why are they on the website? What are they trying to do? What brought them there? What does success look like to that person at that moment? And how do they make absolute sure that button, if the goal is that button is where the moment of truth where that customer is converted, how often do we press in that button and where are the blockers to hitting it? And so his whole point of view was, that much real estate, on one website. So it could be at any level. One of the things I've been talking about, and guys, I would love to have both of you tell me all the reasons in the world why I'm completely crazy for thinking what I'm about to say. And if I am crazy, call me out for it, please. I was interviewed by one of the big analyst firms about a year ago. And they said, what do you see the future of voice of the customer being? Where do you see it going? And I said, well, I think we're going to see a reinvention of all of the visualization that come out of this work. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I think the dashboards are going to die. And they said, well, why? Everybody loves all those gauge charts and trend lines, that you get out of your Qualtrics or your Medallia or whatever. Mm-hmm. And he said, what are you going to do instead? And I said, I'm imagining a day where the data that would have flowed into that dashboard is going to flow into a journey. And then we're going to visualize the journey left to right and infuse it with all the data and start to light up the journey in different ways that tell a story more completely and more visually and more empathetically than shoving more charts at me. And I think the journey map becomes the next iteration of that dashboard. Have you guys seen this, or am I out on a limb somewhere to believe that's even possible?
I haven't seen it, only because I think brands are slow to figure that out, Mark. Because I think once again, you've hit on this duality of data and story.
Yep.
Dashboards are a lot of data. They don't necessarily tell the story that the journey map does, or I should say the journey management depiction does. And so I would like to see it go there. I haven't seen it because, again, it's an evolution. And but I won't debate you on that. I think your vision is actually where it's going.
Yes.
What do you
So
think?
I think two things. Dashboards are about to die, 100%, but we have to specify which dashboards, right? So analyzing vertically your surveys and putting dashboards on top of that, no, I don't think that's a very useful exercise to do anymore, right? It's still handy to understand how your survey is performing, but what you want to get at is actionable intelligence, like I said, from the actual customer experience that cuts across these different teams, right? So we don't have a marketing or an insights or a product dash anymore. We'll look at it holistically. Now, dashboards for data science teams to present back a specific project that they ran, scripting, querying, building, will stay. But looking at it holistically from a journey perspective is a nuance that we're seeing. So what that means, and this is where I think it's going, is journeys are a data model, if you will. It just sets the boundaries for what data we're actually presenting. One piece is the story. The other piece, and you haven't seen it, Cary, because it's not shipped yet, but one of the things we are working on is exactly this. We call it Pulse, not dashboard. We call it Journey Pulse, because in the context of, let's say, claims handling, what are the data you want to see? You want to see your claims volume, which is a performance metric. You want to see maybe your NPS after people handle that claim, did it go up or down? And we want to segment it by geo or by different business unit that is actually doing this. But we also want to see the data, and having a journey map with a bunch of post-its is not enough. If you have 1 million calls a year around your claims that produce even more insights that are packed to customer experience, where there's frustration, where there's enjoyment, when there is excitement, when there's anxiousness, all of those data you want to bring back and visualize. So the journey is one way of doing that. But on top of that, we should see a live dynamic system that is taking data visualization aspects of what we typically call a dashboard, but it's based on a data model that is specifically in that context. And that's a nuance, right? We are people. We need to see the data to understand it. And the best way to see 1 million data points is still in a graph or a pie chart, but it should be packed to the journey in that context, which is a big change from, hey, let's spin up a dashboard and abstract NPS away.
See, and Jochem, let me follow that too, because it's a concept that that I think both of you are leading to, but it's inferred, and that is dashboards are good at telling me where I am right now. Okay, and the problem with the dashboard is this concept of y equals f of x. Okay, remember what we learned in high school. An output is the product of some input operated on by a process. And many senior executives and C-level executives feel that if we're measuring it, it will change. Okay, we hope that Y will change just because we're measuring it. And I think, Jochem, what you've got there, what they do is you're presenting enough information for someone to decide that a change needs to be made, and that change has to be on the inputs to the process or the process itself. Y doesn't change without F or X changing. And I think that's what I see here. It's why, Mark, I commented that I'd like to see that go in the direction of revision. I don't think it's there yet.
Right. But to your point, we should also not forget, like, we would be perfectly capable of starting to do recommendations based off of that, right? So dashboards typically tell you what, and you still need to figure out why, okay?
Right.
So that problem is getting solved right now because we also bring the unstructured data together, which hold more of the details on like why the metric is the way it is, why the number says X and not Y, okay? So we got that, but that is knowing the current state. And then in the context of the broader business, like, okay, what action should we take? There's so many options. Like we have already roadmaps filled with products, with epics, with things we want to do. So what is the right next action to do? What is the right next thing to do? So if we have those data together, well, why should humans take hundreds of these journeys, take hundreds of these roadmaps and do that manually? Like, why wouldn't the system help you to prioritize and rank that? And I think that's where we're going with the modern version of a dashboard. It's like actionable. It has recommendations. There is progress, and it's continually feeding off of itself and not necessarily presenting new facts and saying like, okay, now this month we have a new bar and it says like it's higher or lower.
Mm-hmm. You know, I hear you guys talking about something, or at least by inference. I like to kind of talk about it for just a moment head on. I keep saying on conversations like this, there's no bigger topic than AI. What role does AI play? You know, where is AI sensible? Where can we see a lot of ROI for AI in this type of context? We'd love to hear you guys thinking. I have to start, Jochem, with you. I'm assuming that They Do has kind of an AI, maybe specifically a Gen AI play, or an NLP play, you know, within your journey management framework. How do you see commercializing AI for the benefit of the journey manager?
So the first thing we did is we streamlined the whole journey mapping process. We built an entire fine-tuned version of an LLM that actually does it for you. So typically what we find, especially in large companies, this process takes weeks to complete. Yep. From like getting the initial approval to do the research, to collect the data, to analyze, to put it back, do affinity mapping, build out the journey. Like all of this was weeks. So we brought that down to minutes, okay? Assuming that the data is there. So that's one of the products that we have in our AI suite. So we call it Journey AI. And basically we believe everyone should be able to participate in journey mapping. Again, building that story, step-by-step depiction of the customer reality. We do two things. One is completely generate based on the data. The other is impose a structure. I'm doing claims handling, so that context is relevant to me, so let's see what the data says. Are there gaps? Okay, we need to do more research or send more surveys. Great. Sure. But that's the other piece. So that piece we've tooled up, and we've built a scoring mechanism to rank insights based on variability and impact. So that also helps with the analytics, understanding really what matters, and do we have enough, answering those questions. So those are the first few things. This is live. You can use it. You can try it. It's fantastic. But the next thing that we're seeing is, okay, we also have the performance side of the house. So if we have time series on our insights and the trend on how the different data is explaining the pain points, the frustrations customers have, can we correlate that back to the performance of our metrics? And that's where the magic is starting to happen. But where AI today is, and where it's really good, is doing this grunt work at scale. Just categorizing, making sure that the sentiment is accurate, understanding the different types of emotions, labeling that, structuring it in a journey context, counting, collecting, merging, and basically giving you insights that are extremely well defined and precise, and not just insight like, oh, I have a million data points, like tell me, oh yeah, we have a pain with the billing. No. People struggle with billing because they were sold in the wrong way by a reseller, right? Boom, now we have it. And that is something where AI can truly help and is really good at today, but where it's going, assuming the reasoning capabilities and the reinforcement learning is accelerating, building all of that capability that humans are doing, that Cary used to do in his role. Why should humans do that if you can assist it, if you can gauge, like, is it accurate? Do I trust the data? Can I click 3 times into the original verbatim and assess if it was a good assessment?
And Jochem, you may have seen me chuckle when you said grunt work at scale, because you just described what I was doing about 10 years ago. I wish I had a They Do type tool, because in fact, that's what I was doing. I was manually reconstructing those journeys backwards. Okay.
There you
And I
go.
think that's why you'll always need a human being, regardless of whether AI is involved, because at some point you need to show where you connect the dots across those things, whether it's a ticket number or a call reference ID, things like that. But you just hit, Jochem, on the power that your AI platform is bringing to this. And that is, after I got recognized by the Customer Experience Association for their impact award for building this practice, my boss was still kind of lukewarm about it. He said, Cary, it's really good, but it's not scalable. And so, because again, it was all manual. You've addressed both sides of that now, Jochem. And that's where I think, again, this is the right use of AI, that is arming humans with, again, to use your term, actionable intelligence, and then do something with it.
Right. There you go.
I'm going to take away just the term grunt work at scale and just remember that.
Maybe that should be the tagline, right? Grunt work at scale. There's one thing, right? It's also like the coding tools are getting better. So resolving issues in real time, like there's a definite play for AI there. But I think when we talk about strategic decision making and PI planning and understanding what to do next for the quarter and aligning that to business goals, like that is still where human judgment is essential. Yeah. Understanding the nuances. And I think like for the next year or two, there's a lot of innovation still that we can see where AI cannot do everything and humans need to be in the loop. But like that grunt work piece, like I want to free all people like Cary not doing that anymore, even though for some it's a lot of enjoyment in the process, right? But for most organizations, it doesn't scale and they don't have to.
That's terrific. Hey guys, I'm looking at the clock going, boy, we're sitting at about 54 minutes right now. I want to be mindful of your days and the people who are taking the time to listen. Cary, let's just wrap this up with you to ask first you a question of people might want to reach out to you and find Cary out there. How can people track you down? Where can they find you? Is it just LinkedIn? What's the best way for them to
LinkedIn, Cary Cusumano, CCXP is my LinkedIn. You can also reach me at the same email address is very similar, cary.cusumano@verizon.net. Delighted to have these types of discussions. I mean, I think Jochem and I could continue going here, but we do want to be mindful of everybody's time.
Yeah. Thank you, Cary. And Jochem, I was on LinkedIn last evening and I noticed that you guys at They Do put out recently a new ebook on journey management. And I downloaded it. I thought it was terrific.
Nice.
Would love to suggest that anybody listening to this who wants a copy, that between you and I will make sure they get copies of that ebook. Now, either they should ping me or reach out to you directly and say, send me a copy, and we'll make sure that they get copies. So I think it's well worth their time to take a look at that. It's nice work.
The team did a great job in like synthesizing the essentials. So highly recommend downloading it.
It's a nice little handout from you guys. And it's something I know in an era where we're overloaded with content these days, this is a keeper. This is one that's worth. I used to have a boss that he wrote a book, and he a hardcover book. And I said, why did you go to that trouble? He goes, I'm buying 1 foot of real estate on everybody's desk. I want to write a book that people want to keep on the desk.
Nice. And
always turn back to for help. And I think in some ways your ebook deserves a slot like that. I think it's that good.
Oh, nice. So, maybe we should go for print then.
We'll make sure that's on everybody's desk. So guys, thank you both for sharing the insights with our friends and listeners that are out there and getting the opportunity to spend 50 some odd minutes with both of you. Thank you for this. It means a lot. And again, you guys, if you want to reach out to Cary directly or Jochem, between Jochem, you could find him at theydo.com, and Cary, you're on LinkedIn or your email that you shared a moment ago. Check these guys out, carry on the conversation, link up with them on LinkedIn, talk to them. They know their stuff. These guys are the best in the business jointly at what they do. And I would encourage you to continue the dialogue with either or both of them. I think you'll always learn. I know I learn from these guys every time I talk to them. So thank you both for hanging out here. Guys, you could hang out for a minute because I know we're just kind of short on time, but we're also kind of winding down the show. For those listening, I just want to give you a sense of what's coming up next. I'm going to be traveling over the next couple of weeks into the end of the month of March. For those of you going to the Qualtrics X4 event in Salt Lake City next week. It's a big program out there. I'll be out there, and I'll be out at the Medallia one the week after in Las Vegas. So if you're either at Qualtrics or Medallia conferences in late March, keep an eye out for me. I'm there walking around. I'm looking to talk with you. I'll buy you a meal or a cup of coffee and just sit and talk shop all day long. I'd love to see you at one of those events. The April episode of this show, I'm going to be doing with some friends of mine at a company called Cotera. They're in the agentic AI business, doing some things that I think are super interesting and really right in our wheelhouse about automation and complex workflows and enabling those workflows with AI agents to do the work for you. I think it's pretty hot space, and they're going to be joining me to talk. Guys, with that said, I'm going to end the call where I started by simply saying thank you for taking the time to be on this journey with me. I have been watching through the comments on the side, and I don't think anybody has been able to figure out that video, at least in a way that showed up on the comments. So I'm going to leave the challenge open. If you can figure out the video and the source of the video, message me, put it in the comment on LinkedIn or YouTube or here after the fact, and I'll send you $25. But only one of you guys. I'm not going to spoil it and tell you what it is. Next month, I'll tell you where the video came from. So until then, guys, as they say, in the world of Net Promoter Score, please, I appreciate your promotion. Tell a friend. Hit the little like button, subscribe to this channel, tell a friend to check out one of these shows. There's nothing that gives me a greater energy than hanging out with smart people like this and you guys to listen in. Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you guys again real soon. Take care, gentlemen, and thank you everybody for listening in. Take care, guys. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, Mark, for having us.